Hi, welcome to the Nurture Nature Show. I am the Reverend Dr. LoraKim Joyner of One Earth Conservation and Ministry. I serve as wildlife veterinarian and Unitarian Universalist minister. During our time together, we will have a chance to nurture ourselves so that we can nurture all of nature. Welcome into this community of hope and nourishment and solidarity with all of life. We begin our show with these opening words from Christine Frey. Someday in the future, those who come after us will gather around their wise elders. That's you and that's me. And they're going to ask about the Great Turning, and we will say, "You asked me to tell you about the Great Turning, of how we saved the world from disaster?" Well, the answer is both simple and complex. We turned. For hundreds of years, we had turned away as life on earth grew more precarious. We turned away from the homeless people on the streets, the stench from the river, the children orphaned in Iraq, climate change, and mothers dying of AIDS in Africa. We turned away because that's what we'd been taught, to turn away from our pain, from the hurt in another's eyes, from the drunken parent or the friend betrayed. Always we were told, in actions louder than words, to turn away, and so we became a lonely people caught up in a world moving too quickly, too mindlessly towards its own demise, until it seemed as if there was no safe place left to turn. No place inside or out that did not remind us of fear or terror, despair, loss, anger, or grief. Yet, on one of those days, someone did turn. Turned to face the pain. Turned to face the stranger. Turned to look at the smoldering world and the hatred seething in too many eyes. Turned to face himself, herself. And then another turned, and another, and another. And as they wept, they took each other's hands. And to whole groups of people were turning, young and old, gay and straight, people of all colors, nations, religions, turning not only to the pain and hurt, but to beauty, gratitude, and love. Turning to one another with forgiveness and a longing for peace in their hearts. Today's theme of the Nurture Nature Show is compassionate social change in a time of peril. How can we be compassionate and see beauty and worth in others when we are anxious and afraid? How can we love our neighbors as ourselves when we don't even know our neighbors, they're strangers? And how can we care for our neighborhood, our communities, in this polarized political climate all over the world? I don't have any answers, but I do have some tools that can help us with resilience, growing our compassion, being greater agents of social change, and to help us all move towards the Great Turning. And so what do we mean by social change? What is going on with that? This is, let's tell a joke, shall we? This is a Buddhist monk that's going to buy a hot dog off of the hot dog stand. And he says, and the vendor says, "How would you like the hot dog?" And the Buddha says, "Make me one with everything." And the second step is he passes the guy a $20 bill, and the man doesn't give him back any change. And he says, "Where's my change?" And the hot dog vendor says, "Change comes from within." So social change is about inner work and outer work. The change comes from within. We work on ourselves so we become more compassionate towards ourselves and all life. And that makes us fiercer components of social change. And what is this fierceness? This fierceness some would describe as love. Martin Luther King, in the next slide, has this quote about when he's talking about love, and he says, Jesus is talking about loving your enemies. Love has within it a redemptive power, and there's a power that eventually transforms individuals and societies. There is something about love that builds up and is creative. And that's what we need, not hate, not fear, not anxiety. So his clue for us is to simply love your enemies. Easier said than done. So that's what we're talking about today, is how to be compassionate when we're uncomfortable and anxious and when our needs aren't getting met. Because I really feel that's one of the best tools for social change. Well, how do we actually go about loving our neighbors? What do we mean by love? Well, the next slide shows a definition of love, and it isn't just about feeling good and wanting to be with people and having endorphins flowing around us. It's about striving to truly see the other, to hold their worth and their beauty, or at least to strive for it. It's not about hiding our heads in the sand. As we see in the next slide, it is about really trying to see the earth and each other exactly as it is and not trying to change it, not turning away from it, as we heard in the opening words, but turning towards it. And we're not going to do this very perfectly because we're going to be anxious and afraid. But if we can go about it in the ways that we want, as we see as the girl on the beach in the next slide, it's to find a way to live with both the beauty and the tragedy in life so we can open up. And so we have choice in our actions of how we are with each other when we're trying to do social change. And so it is a practice of love. And it's a practice of loving our enemies. So let's get right to how can we do that? Loving our enemies, well, if they're cute and cuddly, maybe we can do that right off the bat. But in ambiguous times, it's hard. So here is a slide that gives you some steps of how to do this. And these people are dressed up in high heels. They're in somebody else's shoes. So this is that saying that we have in so much of the world, is put yourself into somebody else's shoes. And so that's what you're trying to do. So this is your practice. If you're trying to do social change and you're struggling to see the beauty and worth or have compassion for people you're working against or with, really, for common community needs, imagine being them. Try to put away judgment. And then ask yourself, what are they feeling and needing? What are their universal needs that they have? What's going on with them? And so let's just pick a couple examples of that. Maybe start easy. And they always say, don't try this at home because we're really triggered by people at home. But often those are our enemies because we say, why aren't they doing this? So let's just go ahead. Pick someone who maybe in your household isn't doing their chores, or someone in your family that's not up to your expectations. Why might someone not be doing their chores? I had a son. I couldn't get him to take out the trash. It was his job, and he just couldn't remember. And so I might say something to him about that, and he'd be immediately irritated. And so I would work on it, and I go, no wonder he's irritated and confused, because he's really needing respect, appreciation, because I called him out on the trash piece. And so trying to be with him and understand some of his motivations. And maybe he didn't take the trash out because he's got so much on his mind and he wants ease and rest and wants to play, and so he's not thinking about it. What about somebody in the political sphere? Somebody who maybe is in the opposite ideological camp from you. How do we do that when they say and do things that hurt people or don't seem honest and fair? It's the same practice. You don't have to do this with everybody. It's a choice, okay? But let's just say it's a major political leader and they said something that seemed harmful. And so you say, well, maybe they said that because they're afraid. Maybe they're anxious. And why are they afraid and anxious? Well, they want their jobs. They want self-acceptance. They want acceptance from others. So we practice and we use our body and go, no wonder they're feeling so anxious. They really want self-acceptance. Okay, so that's the practice of empathizing with the enemy. But we're not ready to leave this topic. So in the next slide, we're going to think about that a little bit more. It's empathize with your neighbors yourself. You have to do it for yourself too at the same time. So you ask, what are they feeling and needing? In the political parties, perhaps a terrorist, you don't have to empathize with others. This is only a choice that when you come to face times with people, you have a greater chance for collaboration. And then what you can do is find what desires and needs you have in common. Maybe you all want the cleaner river in town. You just come at it from different ideologies. So rest in that you want health and well-being for the children and the earth. And work on this at home for a year, 2 years, your entire life, so that when you come and actually are working with people, you are holding their worth and dignity while you're also holding pain and discomfort and loss, because so much is at stake in our community practices of social change. And then you have to let go of the end results, or not the end results, but how are we going to get there? Okay, so we're still going to keep talking about loving your enemies, as we see coming up next. Here's the 4-step process to keep in mind. Translate everything into needs, what you're feeling and what they're feeling. What are the universal needs that they're striving for? Self-empathy, check in with what you're feeling and what you need. And then other empathy is what are they feeling and needing? And then get right to request. This is not about not getting your needs and the needs of the world met. So we're going to go back a couple slides and let's talk about what self-empathy is. This is really important work to do if you're involved in social and community change. You need self-empathy. You need to hear, someone needs to hear you, and you need to hear your feelings and needs. So here's a practice that you can do, is tell someone else your dreams. What does the most beautiful world look like to you? And this is a painting that was given to me when I left a congregation I served. And it's of animals flying around, and extinct animals are no longer extinct, and all the people and the beauty. And that's my vision of congregational life. And so share that with someone, and then have them guess what your needs are and feel what your needs. So my needs are beauty and the well-being of others, and to have fun, and to be around biodiversity. So that's self-empathy. And then the next stage, we'll go back to this, is how can you practice having other empathy for other? Well, right now, or put pause on the show, think about someone who is against your dream. Like I was having a dream of a very biodiverse world. I'm a wildlife veterinarian. I want lots of wildlife around. So who is against your dreams? Who might be against that dreams? Well, let's say it's a multinational company that wants to come in and I don't know, do fracking, do mining, clear the forest, something along those lines. So be the CEO of that company and imagine what's going on for them. What are their needs? Why are they doing what they're doing? And if you get caught in cognitive loops that, oh, they're doing it wrong, or exactly how the outcomes is, you're going to be less present when you actually go to meet with them. And then we get to the request. What do I mean by a request? Well, a request is, as we see in the next slide, it's not a demand. It is about being with those and inviting them to make life better. So imagine, what request would you make of someone to fulfill your dream of a more beautiful world? Who would you ask to do that? And maybe you don't like homeless on the streets. So who could you work with? A specific person, a name, not just those people. Find someone and go make your request. So now let's go on to the next slide and talk about requests. Requests are not a demand. It's kind of a joke slide. Stop this now. And actually, in many ways, that's a request, because you're shouting so you can be heard, but you're not denigrating someone else in the process. So requests are concrete and doable in the moment. It isn't, well, I wish you would be nicer. That's not a request. It would be, I wonder if you'd be willing to go out to lunch and talk to me about this. I wonder if you'd be willing to give me 5 minutes to talk for every 10 minutes that you talk. I wonder if you'd be willing that the next time that you cut off my sentence, that I tell you that you've done that and you allow me to complete it. So it's very, very specific request. And we do it with the sense of holding them in worth and dignity. So that's a request. So right now I'd like to tell you a story about the kinds of requests that we can do. And so we'll go on to the next slide. And to be able to tell this story, you have to know about all the preparation that went in front of it. I was going to meet with the mayor of El Paso when I served a congregation in El Paso. And I had to practice hearing a no. That's what the previous slide was about. Is you go, well, what if the mayor says no to my request that I'm going to make? And so I have to be ready to empathize with the person saying the no. If I get immediately defensive and try to talk them into something, they may not be able to hear anything. So I want to know why they said the no. And I try to guess their feelings and needs. And I practice this a lot before we show up. So now we'll go on to the next slide where I was going to tell you the story. I was working with community organizing in El Paso where we had a number of migrants coming from Latin America crossing over into our borders. And what we wanted the mayor to do was to not have an automatic questioning of documents from the police force within the city, is to not put pressure on the people to show their documents and to support the communities that were with and without documents, because the borders separated families and there was a lot of fluid movement. And just that morning, 2 men had drowned coming into El Paso from Texas because they were going underneath the streets. So my job was to go to the mayor. We had monthly meetings with the mayor and ask him to do a desist and have the police not ask people for documents. And the community organizer was based a lot on anger and being tough. But I said, no, I'm going to try compassionate social change. So I went in and I told him, I said, you know, when I read in the paper that 2 people drowned in our city this morning, I was so sad, because I really need to cherish people and have their well-being. Would you be willing to tell me what you thought when you read that article? My request isn't immediate action, it's connection, it's empathy. What's going on with you? And then he gave me a long story about how he came from a family of immigrants, and we had a conversation about that. And then once we had heard each other, I said, so we are here today based on the common values of good life for people. If you'd be willing to have the police not check and search people for documents to be in this country with documents. And he said, done, I will make the phone call as soon as you leave. And so some people said, wow, you did everything right. Self-empathy, you had a request, you empathized with the mayor, and you got the deed done. It doesn't always work out that well, but there's an example of that story about how we can do social change. So let's move on from here and talk about this idea of civility. That's, maybe not drama in the public sphere or denigrating people's personality or who they are. It's not seeing their beauty and worth. So here's a definition of civility, and it's got a little bit different twist on it. It's caring for someone else's identity and needs and beliefs without degrading them, nor degrading yourself, that you matter and your identity matters. And so you are different, but you're present to them and you're open to change. You are really listening, because they're going to know whether you're listening or not. This is not easy. And so you have to be really mindful, aware of all the inner work and judgment going on. And that's why I say it's inner work and outer work. And so, okay, so civility, this is what we're going to do. And as we see next, what we want to do is be aware in the public sphere that civility is hard because we work in a culture of domination and power over. Certain people have been granted privilege at the cost of others. And it's not to say any one person is to blame, it's the system. And so we have to be aware of that, because it's hard to be nice when some people get privilege and others don't. Here's a clue. We all get privilege in certain spheres in our lives, and we're all oppressed in other spheres of our lives. So we have to be aware of this. And if we don't like being told no, or be quiet, I'm talking, or no, I'm not going to meet your request, we have to check our privilege. Maybe we're assuming people are going to listen to us when we want to talk to them. And maybe we're thinking that when we hear a no, we don't really think we need the other people for a really good decision. Just listen to my plan. And so we have to really practice, where is it that we have privilege. And this is a sign of a woman at a march saying they don't shoot white women like me, not as targeted as other marginalized groups. So that's a thing that we want to keep in mind. And we also want to keep in mind this idea of multiculturalism, as we see defined in the next slide, that means multicultural. One of the things it means is that we're aware that there are some things that are very common amongst people. And one of the things that we do share, no matter what culture we come from, are pro-social emotions, emotions that help cohesion in social groups, such as you see listed here: empathy and compassion and love. This goes across culture. So if we can use these positive emotions, we almost don't need to talk. This will help us cross boundaries of difference. And it's very catching too. If you are showing empathy or compassion or love in a group of people, subconsciously it goes out. Okay, so let's continue on with our learning as we're getting closer to wrapping up this course. So when you're trying to do social change, try to feel the compassion, the needs, and if we talk about our commonality of needs, we can get together with very different groups. We can feel similar to them. And it tunes us to those who are in need when we're considering the needs of others. Okay, and now we're going to move on to more ideas of, well, how do you actually organize if we're all so different? How is it that we're going to do this? Here's the 80-20 rule. If you're unhappy with the way things are, there's probably at least 20% others are too. And so to do the great turning, to flip things, is to go find 20% of the population. And once they're on board, it sort of tips over and we can have social change. So go find those people. Go network with those people. Okay, let's continue on with more hints about how we're going to do this. And so when we come together over our needs first, let's go do a march for the dirty river. That's hurting especially marginalized people. Let's march about the needs and the well-being of people, not about how to clean up the river, who should pay for it. Let's just get together and say, yeah, look at all these people. We want a better life. And this helps balance the powerful. And as Martin Luther King says, we have to put tension on the haves. You know, the have-nots. We have to put tension on the haves so they will listen and they will come and negotiate and come at the table. So when we come together for universal needs, we have the power and we get people's attention. And then we can move on to strategy. Okay, let's keep on learning as we go through here. And now all of this has led up to the idea of multiculturalism, about how to come together in difference. And here's a definition of multiculturalism, and it means we have diverse cultures. Every human being has a separate culture. Many animals, other species, have separate cultures too. And it's racial and religious and cultural, our behaviors, our values, our patterns of thinking and community styles. We are always in a multicultural world. And that's why we need all of this inner work to see compassion and worth and beauty in ourselves and others, so we can cross these differences and go find 20% of the population for our social change. Okay, so we're almost experts on this, and so let us go ahead and move along. And remember that this is a call to action. This is compassionate social change. It comes out of compassionate communication or nonviolent communication, because we're so attuned to the needs and the worth of the others, we want to do something. And so part of the inner work is tying it to outer work, that we become activists to remodel society with more justice, compassion, and care. And that's what we're after. And so let's continue on with a little bit of motivation. I was in Honduras last year in 2016 when an activist was killed by the name of Berta Cáceres. And it caused an international uproar because she was fighting for indigenous rights and actually for clean water. And she said, "Arise, my people, so that we can take the wind of our indignation flying free, all of us." So go ahead and be angry and indignant and anxious. But let's remember, none of us makes it unless all of us make it. And so we want to find a way to bring all of us along. But to do that, we have to put tension on the society. And some of the best ways we can do that is to channel and have choice to act in a compassionate way. Okay then, so And so what we're trying to do is to form communities of solidarity, resistance, and hope. Maybe very, very different picture. This is a picture of a community I work with in Honduras, and we're very different people, ethnicities, and people coming from Africa and Asia and the Americas, and all mixing together to say, in this moment, we have solidarity because we want better lives for these children here. And we're going to resist those that have the power, and we're going to work with hope and resilience. And we're going to try to change this. Maybe not the big picture, but at least one small thing. And so we take our steps, one small piece. And so what are the next steps? Let's go ahead and think about that right now. Because to be a social change agent is, we are going to make some changes. We're going to do this. So here are some other next steps you can do. We're just at the end of the show. We're not there yet. There are some reflection questions that you can journal and talk to other people about. So that's one action you can take. Then there are some suggested actions you can do as well. And then we have resources from One Earth Conservation and our Nurture Nature program, where we work with organizations and people and individuals and congregations and nonprofits to help them have resilience to nurture themselves and engage in the world compassionately. So just go ahead and do that. But we're going to end with closing words first. And my last tool for you is, it's hard, slow work. So don't forget to dance as you go. We're continuing with that same reading from Christine Frey. At first, the turning made people dizzy, even silly. There were people standing to the side, gawking and criticizing, trying to knock the turners down. But the people kept turning, kept getting up, kept helping one another to their feet, and their laughter and kindness brought others into the turning circle, until even the naysayers began to smile and sway. And as the people turned, they began to spin, as our earth does, reweaving the web of life, mending the shocking tears, knitting it back together with the colors of the earth, sewing on tiny mirrors so the beauty of each person, each creature, each plant, each life might be seen and respected. And as the people turned, as they spun like the earth through the universe, this web wrapped around them like a soft baby blanket, making it clear all were loved, nothing separate. As this love reached into every crack and crevice, the people began to awake and wonder, to breathe and give thanks, to celebrate together. And so the world was saved, but only as long as you too, sweet one, remember to turn.